Hi, I'm Keegan Sands, and welcome back to Ship It, the podcast from Dept Agency that's made by engineers for engineers. In this episode, we continue to explore origin stories, which dive into how talented people got their start in software. Today, Dept Director of Engineering, Matt Merrill, talks with Dept Senior Director of Innovation, Carlos Dominguez, about Carlos's journey. Listen in to hear about how his interest got sparked in computers, how his grandmother provided some shaping insight, how he learned to program, and finally, how Jackie Chan and Jet Li got him into the video game industry. It's a fascinating trip, and you won't regret coming along for the ride. So without further ado, let's get started.
All right. Hey, welcome to Ship It. I'm Matt Merrill from Dept, and I'm here today with Carlos Dominguez from Dept as well. And we're going to do an origin story. We're going to get to know Carlos. And Carlos is relatively new to Dept. And this is actually going to be a pretty organic conversation because I don't know much about Carlos. And so, hey, Carlos, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really honored to be considered for an origin story.
Nice. Cool. So what do you do here at Dept? Let's start there and tell us what you do, and then we'll kind of get into your background and go from there.
That's a great question. So I'm an exec sponsor. So my official title is exec sponsor, and I'm a senior director of innovation. So as an exec sponsor, I pretty much manage our projects. So one way to look at it is kind of like biz dev, a little bit of biz dev, client relations. But I think the most important part that I see in my job is actually making sure that our Depsters are taken care of, right? So in each one of those projects, is everybody, we have the right people assigned to the right project, but, we always say happy clients, happy Depsters. So I think the biggest part of my job is making sure that our Depsters are having fun in that project. They're providing value, but also that they're in the right place and doing the work that they believe in, and then being able to grow and being able to kind of develop their talent so that they can do other things and things they're passionate about.
Yeah, that is something that I feel like is part of the special sauce here, is that we try to keep our talent happy, and it generally leads to good work and then leads to more work, which is really great. It's interesting that you say that that's the most important part of your job. That's really cool, because I always say at Dept Digital Products, we don't have traditional salespeople. And even just the title exec sponsor, which stands for executive sponsor, like it's more of a partner for your product, right? Do you view it like that? Or I'm curious if like how you view that. I would assume you don't see yourself as a traditional salesperson, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Definitely not. I will tell you that I hate politics and I hate selling stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of people tell me that I'm a good politician and a good salesperson. And I think it's just because I care about the people that I'm talking to. Yeah. And I think most importantly is because I care about the relationships. And so yeah, I think it is important for us when we build those partnerships and relationships that we're looking out for the best interest. And in our case, my role is the best interest of our Depsters and the best interest of our client, right? So that we can deliver the product they need. I think the difference with that in a sales is that from my humble point of view, nothing against anybody selling stuff out there. We need all salespeople out there. But it's from my point of view, for my work specifically, is because, I can go ahead and sell you a bunch of engineers, a bunch of developers, architects, designers, and I can throw a lot of jargon at you on experiences and technology and blah, 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 blah. And we make a lot of money. Great. But guess what? If that's not what the client really needs, then I'm just wasting everybody's time. And yes, we got money, but then that account dies and we got to move on and find a new account.
And potentially unhappy people working on the project too.
Exactly. So. If you have a bunch of people maybe twiddling their thumbs, waiting to be onboarded to understand what it is that they need to do because they don't know what they're doing there. Mm-hmm. If we actually pair the right people with the right project and we're really listening to what the client needs and what our people are looking to work towards and the skills that they have, then everybody comes together and is happy, and you're able to continue and build a relationship for the long term. That is going to give us a lot more money in the long term, but also a lot of happy clients, great quality products, and happy people working. Yeah. There was one of my mentors a long time ago. I was very lucky to work under a company, and I met the president of that division, who eventually became the president of the company. He always said, "Engineers are easy people." Right. And I'm an engineer, by the way, background. So he was talking about me. He was like, yeah, you guys are easy. Like all we got to do is give you a ton of work and all the toys, meaning like oscilloscopes and soldering irons and all this stuff, right? And you guys just get to work and are happy and produce a bunch of stuff. And he was joking about it, but it's very true, right? If you're able to marry those two things, it's like Confucius said, like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I find that that's absolutely true with engineers and designers and builders. Doesn't really matter if builders are happy with the tools and the methods and, you know, their independence and autonomy of what they produce, they're generally happy. So, all right, I got it. I'm so curious. You're talking about oscilloscopes. You're an engineer. What led you here? Start wherever you think is appropriate.
Wow. All right. So when I was an itty bitty baby of about maybe 7 years old, or forget I said 7. I don't want to age too much myself. My grandmother heard about this thing called an Apple II Plus, a personal computer. And she decided that she needed to buy one for her grandchildren because that was the future. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, we're talking about early 80s. In Venezuela, this old woman bought a personal computer, brought it home from Miami, and sat me in front of it and said, you guys got to learn how to use this thing.
Wow.
That's what led me here. Well, that was, you could say that was the spark.
That's very prescient of her.
Well, I'll give you another tidbit about my grandmother. As you can see, we're very close. My grandmother, as she got older, she started covering the computers all the time. She would cover her Mac. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, to protect it, right? Because she was very precious about protecting things and the environment, all these things. And it's like, no, I cover it because I'm getting ready because in the future, people will be able to see each other's living rooms through the computer. She died early 90s before the internet was like a public thing. That's when she died. There were no web cameras. There was no internet. And she said that back then.
She was just like getting into the habit.
She was getting ready because that was going to happen.
Wow. That's wild.
She was a visionary, and she used to take video recordings with like old cameras of me and my brother. We're the oldest grandchildren. And I have myself and my brother an 8-to-8, like reel to reel, and a projector of films of us. And then, that's how I got into like gadgets and computers and stuff.
That's wild. I mean, this podcast isn't about your grandmother, but that's super interesting. What did she have a profession? What did she do?
She was a woman in Venezuela, which is very like, conservative country, if you will. She was well educated. She was taught French by her grandmother because it was the international business language back in the day. So she taught my mom French, and then I learned French from listening to both of them talking. My ear got used to French, so I can kind of figure out what French people are saying when they talk to French. And she started organizations about protecting the environment and like the proper way to trim trees, because if you cut them in the wrong moon, like they don't grow as well, and we have to protect the trees because they're the lungs of the environment. Again, she died in early 90s. So there's a lot of stuff there that you're like, well, of course. But back then, people didn't talk about this stuff.
That is wild.
She taught herself how to use like Publisher or InDesign or something. It was on her Mac. That's why she got a Mac. So she could create these publishings for the organization that he had built, because she would learn how to do it. And she would type those up and interview people and do these little publishings and stuff and print them out and pass them out in the organization. And
that was so neat. So that's amazing. You had somebody like that in your life. And so she starts with an Apple II. Yeah, that's the spark. Where did it go from there?
Spark, right? And so then as I'm growing up and I'm doing things with her and figuring things out, my parents were always very open about like, follow your passion, work hard, good like work ethics and all these things. So I started doing internships, and pretty much I love computers. So I got into computers. I got into playing games because that was one thing you could do on computers, but then really figuring out how they work. And so when it was time I love science. I'm a nerd, engineer, as I call myself now. I'm also an athlete. So my brain is always like, okay, art and design and, paintings and architecture, but then also like electronics and how things work and how do computers work. And so if I was going to build my own computers, I figure I could teach myself programming, but I couldn't teach myself transistors and all this crazy stuff. So I went just to study electrical engineering.
Okay.
And so that's where the background came on soldering irons and oscilloscopes and building chips and all those things, right?
Yep.
What was interesting was I got an opportunity to move to San Diego after doing some internships at Qualcomm. And so I got heavily.
Hey, Carlos. So did you go to school? Did you go to school in Venezuela, or did you go to school in
So I went to
US?
school in Venezuela.
Okay.
There were a lot of problems like strikes back in the time. Then this guy was elected president, who was kind of pretty much the downfall of Venezuela. And the year he got elected president, I had been doing internships in San Diego for Qualcomm. I applied to USD and UCSD, and they accepted me. And this guy got elected. And it was one of those moments where it's like, hey, opportunity's knocking. You better answer that door. And so I packed up my stuff. I remember it was 3 boxes, 2 suitcases, and moved to San Diego. And when he became president, pretty much it was the downfall of Venezuela. Now,
my goodness, was that scary for you?
It was scary, but again, I was raised to take opportunities, and it's a global world, and you never know what's coming. Take advantage. You're very blessed. So when an opportunity comes, use it. Literally the words were, it's a crime not to take advantage of the opportunities and the gifts that you get. Right. That was like the translation of what I used.
So it was all positive. To use that kind of, cliched phrase, you were running towards not running away from something.
Exactly. And so, so I did that, and it was a little scary because, I landed in San Diego. I was like, I don't know anybody. I got all my stuff here. Did I make the right decision? Right. And so, but obviously I did. Because then that led me to electrical engineering, which led me to a couple of projects with Boeing in test engineering, which funny enough, at the same time, I worked part-time helping the university, USD, that I graduated from, to implement a database system, an Oracle system, ERP. But back then they didn't have a student system. So we were implementing it as a student system. So I was designing databases and experiences, CRM systems. And one thing led to another. My contract was done with Boeing. They offered me a job full-time in Boston. I declined because I was going to stay helping USD as a full-time CRM technical analyst. So I got into software development. Right. And so now I'm heavy into databases and all these crazy things that some people think are super boring. And I'm just going like, I love data. This is like, I love this stuff. So I get into database design and customer, resource management, and how are we going to do this, and how to tackle experiences. My boss, we were a tiny, scruffy team of 4. So each one of us led an initiative for this project, and everybody else worked for them because there was only 4 of us, right? So we all were like managers, but also like, worker bees for each other, because we didn't have enough people. And we were going to make this happen in 6 months. And we did it. And we implemented this system where 2 years, somebody else had a hard time, and the whole team, we came in with an agile methodology. Again, that stuff didn't exist back then, but that's what my boss.
Yeah. I'm curious, approximately what time frame is this?
This is 2000, 2001.
Okay. So like Agile was just like an idea that was burgeoning then. It wasn't widely adopted by any stretch.
Correct. She was brilliant. And she was all about like being agile. She was all about like, listen, if I wanted you to agree with me, I would have just cloned myself. Like all 4 of us have our own opinions. I want us to argue about this stuff. But once we leave the room, we're one team of 4 united to do this thing. And that was a huge lesson that I learned that I apply on everything that I do. That was very interesting for me. Some people might think, well, that's kind of boring. But then there was a big turn, which was I got into video games. And all because of Jackie Chan and Jet Li.
And what? Jet Li?
Jet Li.
Okay. Say more.
All right. Now we got to talk about this. So back then, my girlfriend, soon to be wife, she was my wife back then. It was in 2003 when we got married. So maybe we had just gotten married, and she used to do casting for Studio Productions in San Diego. Sony rents a soundstage to do what we're speculating is EverQuest, right? And she's like, oh yeah, so Carlos, you should come over, because I've been playing video games and making my own games with Unreal since since Unreal came out. So she's like, you should come over. They're doing mocap. in one of our sound stages.
What is that?
So mocap is motion capture. It's like when you see those people in like the black suits and the ping pong balls. Yep. Nowadays, you don't need that as much because the cameras are so much better. You can track people without even markers nowadays. But back then, you had a black suit with little balls. Yep. And so they could track the bouncing light off those balls. You create skeletons out of that, and that drives the animation in video games or certain CG movies and stuff. And so she's like, yeah, there's this guy, and we just saw Lethal Weapon 3. You know, that guy. And he's like here doing stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, is it like Jet Li? She's like, yeah, that's the guy. Oh, and the other guy, too. I'm like, what do you mean the other guy? Jackie Chan? She's like, oh, how did you know? Yes, that guy. I was like, I'm on my way. I told my boss, she was awesome. He's like, I have to go to the sound stage because they're doing this. And you know, I love video games. She's like, yeah, go. So I left. I show up. They're wrapping things up. So I kind of missed the session, but I got a chance to meet the kids who were working on this stuff. And I saw Jeff Amata, which is funny because that was kind of like foreshadowing because Jeff Amata, it's a huge stunt coordinator for fighting in Hollywood. He was helping there. Eventually, I worked with him at Activision when we were shooting Bourne video games. We were doing mocap for some of the fighting sequences, and Jeff was a fighting coordinator for that, which was awesome.
Wow.
So I was like talking to the people. It's like, wait a minute. So people actually get paid to make video games? Why did I not do this? What the hell, right? And so these guys were talking to us like, yeah, you should stop by the studio. It's awesome, blah, blah. And, you know, it's like, yeah, of course. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, they don't want me. Why should I do that? Move a couple of years after that, my wife starts working for this university. And she's like, we offer video game art and design. You should apply. And guess what? We have grants. You should apply for a grant. Let's do it. And I was like, are you crazy? It's going to be me full-time working, full-time studying. You sure we're up for this? She's like, let's do it. Why not? So I did. Wow. And so I went back to school and I studied video game art and design. And that's how I got into video games.
Oh my God. Okay. So I didn't even, I mean, this is how much I know about you, Carl. Like so just to set the stage of what I see in Carlos right now, we'll put a cap up on the show notes, but like Carlos's background right now is like a bunch of awesome toys. And all I know is that Carlos worked at Hasbro. And I didn't know that you were in video games beforehand. So, all right. So video games.
Yeah. So video games, you know, what the things that you learn, right? And it's all about being positive, right? So as I'm figuring out what can I do in video games? Because I've been making video games with Unreal since Unreal came out. It was like the Unreal Engine was available on the video games. And so I knew how to do a lot of different things, but you know, it's like if you know everything, you don't know anything, right? So I knew how to do all this stuff, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't quite know. So what I learned was that I love everything that had to do with video games and how to make video games, except for concept art.
Except for the what
concept
part?
Concept art. So that's like all art. The drawings.
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, I still love it and I love art. I just understand that I can't draw for crap. So let's just be honest, right? That's one thing I know. Okay, I'm not going to make money in video games if I'm drawing concept art. I knew that. So, but I love everything else. So when High Moon Studios, which is a studio under Activision, had an event there, I went and I was talking to people, again, building relationships. Hey, how do you get into video games? Talking to all these people, they were like, man, like, we love your energy and we could use somebody like you. And I was like, really? And I pulled out my resume and I gave it to them. That's way back when you carry your resume around you all the time. At least that's what I did, you know, back pocket. Here you go. You know, here's my ID, here's my resume. Those are the two things you're carrying in your pocket, right?
You're an enterprising guy.
Exactly. And so they hired me 4 weeks later. Oh, wow. And so I'm still going to school full time. Now I'm working full time in video games. And I was a tech artist. So that's the guy that you have the developers, the engineers. So they do all the behind the screen stuff, engine, everything that runs the game. And then you have all the artists and designers. That's the stuff in front of you, stuff you see. The tech artist is the backstage ninja that nobody sees, but you're connecting all the things together. You're making things efficient.
I love bridges. I love roles like that. The kind of the hidden heroes. Yeah.
It's awesome. And I got to do the things that I was really good at. Right. And I know this now. I didn't know it back then, but I knew this now, which is building relationships, going to the animation team and talking to them about what they were doing and how, here are some scripts that could help you do it better, right? Teaching myself how to do mail scripting, MaxScript, Python, all those things, because those are the new scripts that are coming out that are going to help the industry. Learning how to do shaders, like, how to render materials, and for transformers, how to make holograms and energy force fields that, that look real and stuff. And so it was a lot of fun because I really got a chance to, again, build bridges between all these different departments, and being like the tech artist for the multiplayer team, being the special effects artist for the multiplayer team, because our special effects artist was busy doing the single storyline and there were too many special effects. It's sci-fi, right? Lots of special effects, right? So only one guy can't handle everything. So that is what really got me into it, but also got me into, again, learning processes and agile. So we had Clinton Keith, which was kind of like the guy that brought agile and scrum to video games. Okay. He was our CTO back then. And so learning all that process led me into this kind of idea of like, there's so many things out there, and it's just, you can make fun and have fun with anything and be inspired by anything. It's just how you put it in there. And so I was designing, level designing with the design team. I was doing special effects. I was modeling things. So for Transformers, I was the weapons specialist, even though I don't like weapons in real life, but I was the weapons specialist. So I was modeling things or grabbing models that some artists were making, breaking them into pieces, rigging them. So it's like you put bones on them so you can play animations on them, building animations, putting special effects, coding them in the game, all these things, so that we could have this crazy thing. And Bumblebee comes out and his plasma cannon can transform out of his arm and then just blow a plasma ball, into the Decepticons.
That must have been so satisfying to see come to fruition.
And the fun thing about that is that another foreshadowing thing happened.
Okay, Carlos is going to pick up a toy.
I did some drawings. I said, I'm no concept artist, but I did some drawings, and I drew that little blaster that you see there.
Minute. I'm gonna get a screen cap of this,
and I can send you a picture of that.
Yeah.
And what that is it's actually, when you look at it, it's actually a soldering tip. It's two soldering tips, and they're built in a way that creates like a connection to the robot, the transformer. It was supposed to be Ratchet's repair ray. When we build a prototype and we send it off to Hasbro back then, I worked for Activision, not Hasbro. Yeah. They reviewed this prototype. They loved it. And so they went in. It's like, yeah, this is the direction to go. Keep making the game. Why do I find out years later when we're about to launch the game? They're like, oh, they made a product line out of our concept art from Transformers War for Cybertron. Oh, and cool. Guess what? They made the weapon that I had prototyped and concept arted and brought into the game as part of the toy for Bumblebee.
Oh, awesome.
So this was my foray into toy designing. I didn't know. Back then I was making video games, right?
Uh-huh.
And then what happens? Kurt Schilling recruits me to come out to Rhode Island to work for 38 Studios.
Oh my God. Wow. I forgot that Kurt Schilling had the video game studio. Yeah. Wild.
So I come out, right? 8 months after I moved my whole family to Rhode Island. My wife is like...
So you went from San Diego to Rhode Island?
Yep.
That's cold. Okay.
Yeah. And then my wife is super pregnant with our second child. We're super excited. 8 months into this adventure, 38 Studios goes bankrupt and closes.
Yeah. I also remember that. Yep.
Yeah. We won't get into the details of that.
Yeah.
And then Hasbro recruited me.
To do toy design.
To work with their design team in a whole new team that focuses on developing mobile apps, digital products that connect to physical products.
Oh, interesting. There's the tie.
There's the tie.
It all comes together.
Everything. So my electrical engineering, my product design, my game design, everything comes together. Now, I am leading Hasbro's internal publishing team on mobile. Please note, Carlos has never, ever made a mobile app in his life when this happens, right? So I don't remember who exactly said it. It was like, fake it until you make it. I don't follow that. I don't believe in that, however. But these people were looking at me for this expertise. So very quickly, as I've done the rest throughout my whole career in life, it's like, okay, I'm here to help you. Let's just be honest. I've never made an app in my life. no, but you've done this and you've done that. And I know that you can do this. And we've seen this. And we start discussing mobile strategies and all these plans. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, apple.com. How do I make apps? Okay, how do you publish apps? Okay, Google, Android. How do you make Android apps? So I start learning all this stuff because we have a business to run. And now people are looking at me to do this stuff, right?
Yep.
So very quickly, things are learned. Good for me. This is in 2012. I know exactly the day because my son was born that Friday and I started on a Monday. So literally on my 4th day at work, I got to jump out because I got to go to the hospital because my son's being born.
This is when you started at Hasbro?
Correct. And so we, that's still early. The Apple store is not what it is today, but obviously it's big enough. I mean, the reason why Hasbro.
Yeah, been around for, what, 6-7 years at that point? 5, 6?
A little bit less. Yeah. But it's getting there. Right. So you don't have obviously the Monument Valleys out yet, but you have the Shift type of games, which were amazing mobile games that were focused on the core of what game design is all about, which is one amazing mechanic, and everything else just flows around that mechanic, right? So there were this really incredible game experiences that were so true and authentic to that game mechanic that, I mean, there was a lot to be learned.
So I'm not a video game person, right? When you say game mechanic, what does that mean exactly?
So rock, paper, scissors, that's a game mechanic that is actually used for most video games to solve combat and different things, right? So a game mechanic will be something like, in the case of Monument Valley, I don't know if you ever saw Monument Valley.
I'm not familiar with that, no.
All right. Have you played any games, video games? Or any game, board games?
I used to play Tetris a lot.
Tetris. So the core mechanic of Tetris is you have to make lines before you reach the top, right? Every time you make a line, you delete that line.
The very simple rule of the game.
That's the objective of the game.
Okay. I'm glad I clarified that because I was thinking it was some sort of technical thing.
No, so it's designed mainly, but it's about the experience. And your core mechanic is I can move my pieces around so they can fit. And when I get, the whole row, it disappears the row.
Got it. Okay.
And so we started building a business focused around that. But the difference or the innovative piece here was that it was all about physical things connecting to digital things. We always said like, hey, that toy is great. You can play with it by itself and it's great. It's a Hasbro toy. That app is fun. And yes, it's an app. But when you bring the two together, you get magic. So you get things like Furby Boom back here. I'm pointing at Furby right now. Where when it's ready because you've taken care of it, it gives you a digital egg. So he starts making like a pee-pee dance. You turn on your app and then he goes, and then an egg rolls into the screen as if it was Furby just gave you an egg, right?
That's wild.
Then you take care of that egg. And when the egg hatches, it hatches a Furbling, which is a baby Furby, but it's digital. If you don't take care of that baby, it cries. Guess what? Your physical Furby knows that the baby's crying and he starts to talk about it. You bring the two together. Real Furby in real life sings and starts to calm down the digital Furby. And the digital Furby looks up and then it comes down and it smiles.
Oh my God. I'm not going to lie. Like, this is making me anxious, but okay. I know, I'm sure, as a parent, I'm like, oh my God. It's like,
but it's the magic of bringing those two things together. Right. Yeah. And so the learning there was the fact that, truly magic could be made when you brought these things together.
Yeah. Wow.
And I did that for 10 years and I loved every minute of it. And I still do, as you can hear from this.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my next question. I mean, that sounds like such an amazing gig. What drew you to do, what you're doing at Dept now?
So it's interesting because, again, as we developed these things and we worked on all this stuff, there's a lot of different things in front of us, right? So my clients were Transformers, Littlest Pet Shop, My Little Pony, Monopoly, Game of Life, right? Those are all my Nerf, those were all my clients. And each one of them has their budgets, just like we do with our clients. But sometimes the priorities and all those things conflict with each other, right?
Yep.
And we were a very small team trying to cover too much, right?
Yep.
So what happens here with Depp was when Jorge came around and he's like, hey, we have this great opportunity for you. Actually, Anne was the one that recruited me because I had met Anne when she was a Virgin Pulse.
Got it. Anne Kimura, she's one of our heads of design. So yeah.
Exactly. And so so when they brought me to it, I was like, oh my God, this is the same thing I'm doing, but with more freedom and across all categories. So I can make a bigger difference. I'm not only making a difference in this kind of small team with a small reach, I can now have a global reach and really make a difference and follow the purpose of a company that I believe in. I'm still having a blast. I still have fun with all our clients. And each challenge has its own little fun twist to it that challenges me and makes me want to like find ways to solve it in most efficient ways. So
what a story, man. Made my job easy on this one. I got two questions. First one, out of your whole career, what's your favorite project or story that you've worked on? Funny, sad, interesting, whatever your choice is.
So I think one of my favorite stories that I cannot talk about was working on a project called Drop Mix, which is a music mixing game using cards in collaboration with Harmonix, our neighbors in Boston. So I got on a plan to convince NXP, who is the leading manufacturer of NFC. So that's near field chips, right? So chips that you put on cards. I got on a plane with a presentation to convince them that they needed to work with us because we needed them to be able to make this product. And that was just awesome. And it was funny because once I got out of that meeting, I was like, I just told the president of this company, bajillion, trillion company, I don't know, what they needed to do their business and how much, they needed to lower their prices so that it could work. And I was just straight honest with them. I said, we need you to sell us this chip at this price. Something I've never done in my life, but I believed in it, in the product, and we had a good story to tell. And by story, I don't mean like a lie. A story is in like user story and the experience and everything. And we had a good relationship with them so that I was able to go pitch it to the president. And he trusted us and he said, okay. And he did it.
That's really interesting. So was that early on in NFC type technology where they were more expensive?
NFCs have been around for more than 30 years. Because you see them on poker cards for poker tournaments. They use them. You see them on hotel room keys and everything. Yep. They have not ever done it in entertainment. They have only done in transport. They have done it for like hotels but not for entertainment.
Interesting. All right. And my other question is, what's one of the most challenging situations you hit? When did you learn from it?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest and challenging situations I've had, and there've been many, it was understanding and being able to say no and kill a project.
Okay. Do you have a specific example?
So I can't talk a lot about it because of confidentiality, but a simple situation is you work very hard in a project. It could be your code, it could be a design, it could be a concept idea that you have, right? Yep. And a lot of times when you go at it, it doesn't matter which angle you take, it's still your project. And you can, a lot of times can get very personal and attached to a project. And so I think I still believe today, and it's like been 7 years, I believe in this amazing experience and product that we could have made. But the reality was that the numbers were not there. There was no business for it. And so you could make the best game, best toy, the best mobile app or web app that in the world. But if there's no market for it, there's no business for it, it's kind of pointless, right? And so I think somebody said it very well, and it's a hard truth, but it's true, which is like having a sticker here. It says, if it doesn't turn a profit, it's a hobby.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a hard truth, but it's a real truth. So I'm a very passionate guy. I'm a dreamer. I'm the guy that says, hey, we got to think huge, big, so that we know where we want to go. But then we need to narrow it down and focus and deliver in the steps that we need to get to that dream. And so that was a hard lesson for me to learn, but it was a reality. It's like, we did have innovation that hasn't been seen today still.
Yeah, and I can understand why you can't name specific. That makes total sense now. But yeah, that is really tough because I imagine you pour a lot of your heart and soul into a lot of that. And just to kind of relate it back, like, we work with a lot of different clients, and we see successful clients, we see not so successful clients, and one of the things that I have seen that we offer that's super valuable is the idea of a design sprint or a strategy sprint, where it's like before you even start building, before you start, looking at like detailed mock-ups, like let's just put this thing out in front of some people and the idea and see if it takes hold before you spend a lot of money and create it. So yeah.
And what's interesting and it's hard to hear is that, we drove all that out of insights. So there was a market, there were insights, but by the time we were able to go into production, that had moved on.
Interesting.
And so the hard thing is, and I can talk about this,
especially in the entertainment industry, that moves real fast.
Exactly.
Trends move fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So take it back to video games. That's an easier one, and it's pretty public, a lot of this stuff. Video games usually take 2 years or less or more to make, depending on what kind of game it is. Red Dead Redemption took 8, but there was a lot of things. There was a lot of things into the development of that, of why it took 8 years. But when you predict and you're about to launch that game, it's very different insights on marketplace than later. And the big insight there is that you may be pouring millions of dollars into development, but when it comes time to launch it, if the market's not right, you cut your losses, because the amount of money you're going to spend to market that and then later not make profit, it's a lot worse than the millions of dollars that you have spent on developing.
Yeah, it's avoiding the sunk cost fallacy, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whew, man. Tying it all together. Good stuff. All right. So let's end it on, we usually do picks, right? Which this is anything that you are currently digging. Could be movies, could be work related, could be anything. I'll go first just to set the example, and we'll go to you. So my pick for this time is Bear on Hulu. It's a show about a family sandwich restaurant in Chicago. Sounds like the most ridiculous premise ever, but man, are the characters good. I love it. Just so good. And also, like, you get to see these delicious sandwiches and they make me hungry. So
very nice. So
totally not related to anything we just talked about, but it's a great show. So
I hope you don't watch those right before you go to bed, because then you go to bed
and I get hungry. Yeah. So, all right. What's yours?
All right, my pick, man, too hard. So I'm, as you can see from me talking, it's hard for me to focus on one thing when it comes to that stuff. I love music, I love movies, and I love all sorts of that. So, but I'll say if it's one pick, what I'm a little focused on is processing. So that's like a Java-like script program where you make art, you make programmatically art.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's gotten me back into coding, because I haven't done coding in so long. I was
is it like a library called processing?
So go to processing.org, and it's just like a little program that you can run. You can download the little editor on your Mac if you want, or PC. You can do it online. It's great. And you're just literally just running a couple of scripts to do stuff. So I've been making art with that stuff because I love art. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. That's a fitting pick, and it's much more related to what we talked about than what I have.
No, not at all. What makes life is all those nuggets, all those sweet things, right?
I agree.
We talked about how we love music, right? And so I'll play Canon in D in my acoustic guitar, but sometimes I love to rock out and do Johnny Ramone's like "What a Wonderful World," and a little heavy distortion, and so hey.
Oh, that's funny. Well, Carlos, thanks. This was super interesting. I can't wait to get this one out. And thanks so much for spending some time.
Thank you. It's a big honor.
All right.